Hey everyone, and welcome back to From the Author's Chair. I'm Sarah Kate Ishii. Before we head on into today's chapter, I have an exciting update. I'm making really good progress on my current fantasy novel, Iron Angels. For those of you who don't know, Iron Angels is my standalone Noblebright fantasy. It's a world where some kind of fantasy, celestial cross, elemental, I guess you would call them, people walk among humans, and the main character is a human prison guard called Celyn, who has always dreamed of having a better life, a better job. She lives in a really cold, desolate place in one of the kingdom's most high-end prisons, but she's desperate to leave, of course. And one day she accidentally ends up saving a really important person, and they offer her a job as their private bodyguard. So I'm deep into self-revision right now, and things are really clicking into place. I've officially booked my developmental edit for the end of April, which is both terrifying and exciting. I've also lined up my copy and line editor, but I'm holding off on setting that date until I see how the developmental edit goes. I'm still really hoping to get this book out this year. Okay, so now let's head on into today's reading. We're into Chapter 5 of Origin Curse. Chapter 5. A Family Heritage. They turned another dark corner in the tunnels under the palace, and a chill spiked at Yoshiko's spine. "What is this place?" she asked, turning her attention to the dark stone walls, feeling her curiosity get the better of her. She didn't want to talk about death or betrayal anymore. They'd passed through a maze of tunnels and small stone chambers, like her mother had mentioned, and entered an underground cavern. It was huge, big enough to fit the town square, Yoshiko thought. When her mother first guided Yoshiko out of the tunnels, the colossal space enveloped in darkness felt overwhelming, almost threatening. Yet, as her sensitive eyes adjusted, she saw towering curved walls slope to a high vault in the ceiling far above them. The caverns themselves were simple carved walls with stone buildings, creating basic shelters for whoever would come down here. But the ceiling was something she'd never forget. Star-shaped holes dotted the stone roof in a way the light of the coming dawn was starting to seep through, taking the edge off the unrelenting darkness of being underground. Yoshiko wondered which part of here town was above them, and whether she'd be able to see the star cutouts in the ground if she were to stand up there. It was incredible, like a town hidden beneath the main city, with this great cavern as a central place. Yoshiko wondered whether there had ever been a need for people to live in these underground tunnels and chambers and gather in this great hall. It looked fit for purpose. Our ancestors built it in the height of the feudal era, a couple of 100 years ago. In case of attack, tunnels and entrances all over town led people down here. With the people out of the way, the samurai could fight with less worry. It's not been used since. It was their solution to looking after their folk in dark times, I guess. Asami shrugged as she spun around with the lantern to look about them. "You don't agree?" Asami looked at her daughter with a faint smile, then led them in a slow walk around the main chamber so Yoshiko could see more. "I think it's a waste. When you have something, you should ensure to use it." She gestured vaguely about her and continued. "This has sat beneath us for generations, unused and forgotten. Think of the potential it has. Yet, I was sworn by my mother to keep it secret from all except you. And even you, I was only allowed to tell on your coming-of-age day. Imagine what we could do to this place if we could make something of it." Yoshiko looked at her mother's daydreaming face and wondered what sorts of things she pictured when she looked at the stone walls. The two women walked in quiet company, imagining what could come of this place, until it felt their legs would crash to the floor. Neither spoke. neither needed to, and when the fatigue of staying up all night outweighed their shattered emotions and adrenaline from the escape, Asami walked arm in arm with her daughter to a place she said she'd come earlier that night. A small stone hut on the edge of the cavern. "You brought supplies." Yoshiko looked at neatly organized futons and blankets and simple eating utensils, and wondered how they got down here. "How many trips did you take?" Her words slurred and mumbled. The simple futon itself seemed more interesting than how it got here, though Yoshiko wondered how her mother had wrestled with climbing it down the castle moat walls to reach the entrance. The simple futon itself seemed more interesting than how it got here, though Yoshiko wondered how her mother had wrestled with it, climbing down the castle moat walls to reach the entrance. Her mother had said there were other entrances from all around the town. Had Asami used one of those to bring supplies in? Wanting to immediately pull the futon out and collapse into it, Yoshiko looked at her stinging and bloodied hands and searched for something to wash them. She didn't want to bloody the bedding. 3, Asami replied simply, crouching beside some of the supplies and digging out a Hyotan bottle. She gestured for Yoshiko to crouch beside her. With the fatigue of the day catching up with her, Yoshiko lowered herself to the ground beside her mother and held out her hands, wincing as the cool water washed over the heat of her wounds. She hissed at the pain and clenched her teeth together, shaking the water from her hands before pulling out her futon and laying it out, hurrying inside it and then watching her mother for signs of tiredness. Vision blurring and eyes struggling to remain open any longer, Yoshiko managed one more thing before she collapsed to the oblivion, wrapped like an insect in her covers and futon. 3, you're something else, Mama. Yoshiko didn't see the world above for a few days after their escape. Asami, ever careful of her daughter's safety, asked Yoshiko to stay below until she could figure out the state of the castle above. So, each day, Asami slipped above to spy on the castle and hear some sort of news, and Yoshiko waited around in the caverns, exploring and trying to discover more. Her mother had brought news that the council had arranged a hunt for them, extending beyond the main town to the outer villages of Hiei, claiming the daimyo and Yoshiko had gone missing, kidnapped by those who killed the daimyo's late husband, and told the region it was of utmost importance they were reunited at the palace. It wasn't long before the streets filled with guards, pulling over market stalls and barging into buildings to find them, showing it was more of a hunt than a rescue mission. When Yoshiko learned of this later, she realized how life-saving Asami's plan to hide out in the caverns had been. Had they escaped above, there would have been nowhere they could have hidden without being dragged back to the palace for whatever fate the traitors had planned for them. And while they hid in the caverns, waiting for the search to quieten, Yoshiko continued to explore and learned a great deal from her mother. The women walked through the passageways that unfurled underground between chambers and the main caverns, of which, Yoshiko discovered, there were a few. With only their lantern flames to let them see clearly, and their keen eyes to get a feel of what lay beyond the light. The idea of the spirits of those who'd been here before them made Yoshiko's skin crawl. And with so much darkness beyond them hiding massive empty places, it was creepy. With her mother's instructions for bravery, and remembering her father's endless curiosity and interest in how the world worked, Yoshiko found some peace. She breathed, focused on how amazing a creation it was, wondered at how and when it had been built, and talked with her mother. As they walked, her mother told her about the past, of the rulers that came before them, including those who ordered the build of these caverns, and of wars, their family history, and the gifts and unique heritage of their family line. so many things Yoshiko was never meant to know until she came of age, Asami told her now. Our heritage is rare, Asami began. It follows our matriarchal line, down the line of daimyos. That in itself is not rare. What passes through each line is. Yoshiko met her mother's eyes, which looked as if a dark shadow was spreading beneath them. Yoshiko wondered whether her mother was sleeping well, or whether her pale skin just looked paler in this light. Both women had shrugged on thick jackets and huddled them closely as they walked. The caverns were cold, so they spent most of their time moving. Many generations ago, in the age the spirits walked between this world and theirs freely, our ancestor was cursed. You've probably heard folk tales where humans were blessed or, more commonly, condemned by the spirits. Once, a heartbroken and vengeful woman was turned into a dragon, fated to hunt down the man who broke her heart, only for both to suffer. You know the story of Kiyohime. Well, a woman in our line was cursed as such, to transform into a dragon and her descendants with her. I don't know why. That much is lost. It gave her strength and power, abilities only the dragons could have, including transformation, if strong enough. But each time she transformed, she became more and more like a dragon. Each time, her human body paid the price until, eventually, it consumed her. And when she turned into a dragon, she could no longer be human again. They say that's when they go crazy. Humans trapped inside the body of a dragon, they hunt down whatever is closest to what made them that way, then live until they die of some unnaturally old age or are killed. But Yoshiko didn't understand why this was a curse or why it had anything to do with revenge. Aren't dragons peaceful creatures, spirits of water, blessing, and good fortune? This didn't match what she knew of dragons, though it was true she'd read the folk tales of the unfortunate Kiyohime, who had turned into a dragon and breathed fire on the man who had betrayed her. She'd never believed it, thinking it was just a story. Everyone knew dragons were water and air spirits and couldn't breathe fire. The dragon spirits, yes, but those cursed to become one become the opposite. They become creatures of earth and fire, and they sought strength. For everything there is an opposite, almost as if dragon spirits are pure and natural, and the cursed dragons are imitations, blasphemous to the name of the spirits, and cruel, and thus are opposites. Yoshiko still didn't get it. Surely it was down to the cursed person as to how they acted. Asami continued anyway. The curse travelled down our family line. A great-grandmother in our line decided the next generation should not know of the heritage until they come of age, to give them a chance of a longer lifespan. After all, if you didn't know about your powers, you wouldn't try to use them. The later in life you used them, the longer it would take for the curse to take hold. At this point, Asami pulled up her long sleeve and nodded at Yoshiko to look. Navy and silver scales dappled her mother's fair skin, and Yoshiko had to look twice to believe what she was seeing. "Is that on your arm?" She couldn't believe it. "Scales?" Asami nodded. "They came gradually, and I've stopped using my powers to slow the change." Well, now Yoshiko knew why her mother always wore long sleeves and habitually pulled at them, trying to be sure they were pulled down low enough to hide her scales. "Is it anywhere else?" Yoshiko wondered how Asami would hide it if it appeared on her neck or face. "A few places." Asami sounded embarrassed, as if she'd never spoken about it before. "My back, shoulder, leg. It's worse in places closest to your core, I think." I can't remember what my mother or my grandmother looked like. They both wore lots of layers, though that wasn't abnormal in those times. Those ridiculous 10-layer kimonos nobility had to wear back then. Did father know? Yoshiko interrupted eagerly, wondering what her peaceful, world-loving father would have thought, and seeking her mother's face for a reaction, wishing to know more. With the way the scales caught the light, she thought he'd have loved it. Her wild, warrior mother only looked more so with the effects of the curse. It was like something out of a story. Yoshiko bet her father had written about it. Asami blushed again. Of course. He was always so good about it. Though Yoshiko waited for her to finish, Asami didn't say more. Yoshiko's heart dropped a little. If her father was here, he'd have laughed and given Asami a nudge, carrying on the story for her with grand gestures and a bright smiling face and lively voice. Well, now I know how you could climb those walls, Yoshiko teased her mother when they finally arrived back where they'd stored their belongings and took pots to make tea, trying to keep the mood light. Why doesn't anyone know? Surely it's something we could use for the better and help our people. Use it as a blessing, not a curse. Her mother chuckled, just like your father. Yoshiko slowed pouring the water into the pot to watch how her mother lit the fire. But Asami used stones, just like everyone else. Yoshiko felt disappointed. People used to know. The cursed ancestor found a way to use it for good, and the power of the dragon was known through the country and celebrated. Stories say the cursed daimyo and her husband of that age governed the Hiei region together before a war came from the northwest. The daimyo of that region seeking our good port location. The enemy destroyed our ancestor's husband and many others. The daimyo stood up with her powers against the enemy force, bringing Hiei, and even the country, peace. The shogun himself thanked her, and I think that's why our family is close to the shoguns even now. Because of that, it was changed. For a few generations, it was thought of a blessing to protect our people. Then, someone from a distant region found out about the dragon line and came to attack, trying to convince people our family curse was a dangerous one, with warnings of the story of Kiyohime's fall to try to turn people against our family. He brought a huge army and held our region under siege. For a long time, the ancestors held out. They began digging underground, with the daimyo of the time's dragon powers to burn quickly through the rock, to create a tunnel to go and call for help and bring supplies. They managed to get help and survive the siege. After the region was rebuilt, they continued digging to create these underground caverns, realizing how much it had saved them in battle. Since then, it has been thought if one enemy had tried to come for the power, then others would. It became something kept only within the family. And, after a couple of generations, the power was forgotten. It became a myth to the people beyond those in our family. Not even the people of here, those we use our powers to protect, remember. Now, with Hitoshi gone, only you and I know. They sat for a while, neither stirring, both lost in their thoughts and staring into their green tea. Then, while Yoshiko was inspecting the damage to her hands and washing them with fire-heated water to keep them clean and help them heal, her mother spoke out again. Asami looked at the ceiling and said there was something else she had almost forgotten. She stood, lit a lantern, and gestured for Yoshiko to follow her to the center of the room. I used to sneak down here sometimes. I discovered this. Yoshiko tried to imagine her mother sneaking out of the palace and into the dark caverns alone. She shivered at the thought of this great emptiness, alone. At the center of the courtyard in the cavern, directly below the star-cut-out dome, was a large pulley. Asami tugged failingly at it with one hand before passing Yoshiko the lantern so she could use both. Yoshiko watched with her head cocked to one side, holding the lantern out for her mother to see. "What does it do?" "You'll see in a moment," Asami grunted as she pulled hard, leveraging her body weight against a lever that hadn't been touched for what must have been decades. "Good job you're a dragon," Yoshiko said, a smile flashing across her face. Asami looked almost shocked until she saw the grin on Yoshiko's face grow bigger. Then her lips curled upwards for just a moment, and a glint flashed across her mother's eyes. Indeed. The lever finally gave way, and the pair heard several loud, dull, clunking noises echoing through the cavern. Yoshiko felt her ears twitch at the sounds of rocks moving and more levers shifting. She couldn't even identify which direction all the sounds came from. She looked to her mother, panicked. What's going on? It sounded like a cave-in. Had her mother gone mad after all? Was she trying to bury them under a town of rock? Then the crushing and grinding came to a halt, and Asami gestured upwards. When Yoshiko looked up, she saw the sparks of daylight peeking through the cutaways in the roof and trails of light bouncing around the room. It looked like stars were falling from the night sky. When she followed the streams of light down the stone dome roof, Yoshiko saw the small streams of light hit panels that moved out from the walls and bounce in other directions. The cavern lit up with bigger streams of daylight. The small stone huts became visible in the inky darkness, and soon the cavern was washed in breathtaking, soft light. "I call them star streams," Asami explained, still looking at the light above. Silver mirrors are placed around the cavern. The light from the cutouts in the roof hits the mirrors and is bounced in a different direction. It creates light where there is none. Only the larger courtyards have this. It was meant to create gathering places for people to interact and get a moment of light when they hid from a siege. A place they could bathe in the light from above, rather than live the unknown length of war in darkness with only fire to see by. Yoshiko's heart lurched. She'd never seen or heard of anything so magical. True to the name, they looked like streams of stars. Ribbons of light hung everywhere and showed her buildings she never expected to see in the caverns. Little stone and wooden huts and outbuildings. When she glanced at a hut close by, she realized it even mimicked design elements they'd normally use in Hier buildings above. Even for places to hide from war, it had to feel like Hier. "So clever," was all she could manage, stunned. "I'm sure this idea could be built upon more." Asami followed Yoshiko's gaze around the room and smiled. Her eyes then returned to the mechanisms poking out from the walls. What she said next came out as if she were in a distant dream, lost in thought. "I've heard they don't get enough light in some countries, from those I've met while on my travels overseas, and the people are sad and unhealthy in dark months. Maybe this would help." Yoshiko stared at her mother. She knew Asami was bright. She'd seen her in the governing halls, after all, solving problems of the country and the local alliances. But how did Asami know what it was like in other countries? All the neighbouring regions had similar weather patterns, roughly, as here, with rain and sun in a fair equal measure that made the fields thrive and the rivers glisten. But other countries beyond their neighbours? Did that mean her mother had crossed the ocean? Watching her mother smiling up at the star streams, Yoshiko realised she didn't know much about Asami or the true history of her family and here, after all. And that's the end of Chapter 5. Thanks for listening and for being here with me on this audiobook journey. I'll keep sharing updates on Iron Angels as I go, so if you're excited for it, make sure to follow along. If you're enjoying the podcast, don't forget to subscribe, and you can always find me on socials at Sarah Kate Ishii. See you next time for Chapter 6. Until then, happy reading and stay creative.